3,800 meters beneath the Indian Ocean, an autonomous underwater vehicle descends through absolute darkness. Its cameras sweep across the seabed, scanning for something that vanished 10 years ago. Then, the sonar locks onto a massive debris field stretching across the ocean floor. Metal twisted beyond recognition, personal effects scattered like confetti. And at the center of it all, a section of fuselage that tells a story no government wanted told. For a decade, the world was told that Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 simply disappeared. The vanishing. March 8, 2014, Kuala Lumpur International Airport. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 prepared for what should have been a routine red-eye to Beijing. The Boeing 777 extended range was one of the most reliable aircraft ever built. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah had 18,000 flight hours. First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid was completing his transition training to the 777. 227 passengers boarded. 12 crew members completed their pre-flight checks. Among the passengers were families heading home, business travelers, 2 Austrian tourists, whose stolen passports would later fuel conspiracy theories, and 23 employees of Freescale Semiconductor, a detail that would haunt investigators for years. Chinese nationals made up 153 of the passengers. Their families would become the loudest voices demanding answers that would never come. At 12:41 a.m. local time, Flight 370 pushed back from the gate. By 1:19 a.m., the aircraft was climbing through the night sky over the South China Sea, bound for Beijing. The last routine communication came at 1:19 a.m. Captain Shah spoke with Malaysian Air Traffic Control, saying, "Good night, Malaysian 370. His voice was calm, professional, unremarkable. That transmission would be analyzed thousands of times in the years to come. Investigators would search for stress, for hidden meaning, for anything that might explain what happened next. At 1:21 a.m., Flight 370's transponders stopped transmitting. The aircraft vanished from civilian radar screens. This was not a malfunction. Transponders do not simply fail, they are switched off. Someone in that cockpit made a deliberate choice. But the plane did not crash. It turned. Malaysian military radar tracked the aircraft as it banked sharply to the west, crossing back over the Malay Peninsula. This was not a course deviation. This was not a navigational error. This was a 180-degree reversal executed with precision. The Boeing climbed to 43,000 feet, well above its assigned cruising altitude. Then it descended sharply. Radar showed the aircraft weaving between Indonesian and Thai airspace, following the border as if someone aboard understood exactly how to exploit gaps in radar coverage. At 2:22, the plane crossed the northern tip of Sumatra and headed out over the Andaman Sea. Malaysian military radar lost contact. The aircraft was now over open ocean, invisible to ground-based systems. But it was not gone. 7 satellite pings recorded by British company Inmarsat showed that Flight 370 continued flying for nearly 6 more hours. The plane turned south at some point after 2:40, heading into the vast emptiness of the southern Indian Ocean. The last ping was recorded at 8:19. Somewhere in that darkness, 239 people went down with their aircraft. No distress call was ever sent. No Mayday. No emergency beacon activation. The Boeing 777 simply vanished into the ocean and took its secrets with it. The search that found nothing. The search for Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 became the largest and most expensive aviation search operation in history. 9 countries deployed ships, aircraft, and satellites. Australia coordinated the underwater search across 120,000 square kilometers of ocean floor. The effort would eventually cost over $150 million and find nothing. The initial search focused on the South China Sea, where the transponder went dark. Ships from Malaysia, Vietnam, China, and the United States combed the waters. They found oil slicks that turned out to be fuel from passing vessels. They investigated floating debris that turned out to be garbage. Days passed with no trace of wreckage. Then the satellite data was analyzed, and the impossible became clear. The aircraft had flown for hours after vanishing from radar. It was nowhere near where anyone had been looking. the search shifted to the southern Indian Ocean, one of the most remote and hostile marine environments on Earth. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau took the lead, working from mathematical models based on the Inmarsat pings. The data suggested the plane had crashed somewhere along what investigators called the seventh arc, a curved line across the ocean where the final satellite handshake had occurred. In October 2014, the underwater search began in earnest. The Australian ship Fugro Discovery deployed deep-tow sonar systems capable of scanning the seabed 4,000 meters below. The technology was sophisticated. Side-scan sonar swept areas up to 6 kilometers wide. Autonomous underwater vehicles dove deeper, capturing high-resolution imagery of the ocean floor. The search area was expanded repeatedly as each survey zone came up empty. Volcanic ridges, deep trenches, fields of manganese nodules, everything except aircraft wreckage. By January 2017, the official search had covered 120,000 square kilometers and found nothing. The Australian, Chinese, and Malaysian governments suspended operations. The families of the missing protested. They held vigils, issued statements, and accused authorities of abandoning their loved ones. The official position was that the search had been thorough and exhaustive. The aircraft was somewhere in that vast ocean. But without new data, continuing was futile. In 2018, a private company tried where governments had given up. Ocean Infinity, an American marine robotics firm, offered to search on a no-find, no-fee basis. They deployed 8 autonomous underwater vehicles simultaneously, covering ground faster than any previous effort. These vehicles could operate in formation, scanning enormous areas while transmitting data in real time. For 3 months, Ocean Infinity searched 50,000 square kilometers of new territory. They found a shipwreck from the 19th century. They mapped undersea mountains that had never appeared on any chart. They did not find Flight 370. Debris was washing ashore. In July 2015, a wing component called a flaperon was discovered on Reunion Island in the western Indian Ocean. French investigators confirmed it came from a Boeing 777. Serial numbers matched Flight 370. Over the next several years, more than 30 pieces of debris were recovered from beaches across the Indian Ocean. Flap sections, engine cowlings, cabin interior panels. Each piece was cataloged, analyzed, and compared to Boeing's maintenance records. Most were confirmed as originating from Flight 370. The debris field stretched from Madagascar to Mozambique to South Africa, carried by ocean currents over thousands of kilometers. The wreckage told investigators that the aircraft had hit the water with significant force. Some panels showed damage consistent with a high-speed impact. Others appeared to have separated during descent. But the debris raised as many questions as it answered. If pieces of the plane had washed up over such a wide area, why had the main wreckage not been found? The ocean floor search had covered the area where the satellite data predicted the crash. Either the models were wrong, or something about the flight's final moments did not match what investigators assumed. The Malaysian government released its final report in July 2018. It came 4 years after the disappearance, and it ran to 495 pages of technical analysis, timeline reconstruction, and carefully worded conclusions. The report found no evidence of mechanical failure, no evidence of a terrorist act, no evidence of pilot suicide, though it stopped short of ruling it out entirely. The most definitive statement in the entire document was this: the reason for the loss of MH370 cannot be determined with certainty until the aircraft is found. 4 years and $150 million had answered nothing. The official story unravels. From the beginning, the Malaysian government's handling of the investigation fueled suspicion. In the first days after the disappearance, officials contradicted each other in press conferences. Flight paths changed. Timelines shifted. Satellite data that should have been released immediately was held for weeks. Families of the missing accused Malaysia Airlines and government officials of deliberately withholding information. The pilot suicide theory emerged as the most widely accepted explanation. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah became the focus of intense scrutiny. Investigators examined his personal life, his political views, his flight simulator at home. Malaysian police found that Shah had used the simulator to practice a flight deep into the southern Indian Ocean, a route eerily similar to what Flight 370 appeared to have taken. This was presented as evidence of premeditation, but investigators also acknowledged that airline pilots frequently use simulators to practice unusual scenarios. The route Shah had flown was not proof of intent. It was ambiguous at best. Others pointed to the first officer. Fariq Abdul Hamid was younger, less experienced, and had once allowed unauthorized passengers into the cockpit during a flight, a violation of security protocols. But there was no evidence of psychological distress, no financial problems, no known motive. The idea that Fariq had hijacked the plane and flown it to destruction required ignoring everything his colleagues and family said about him. Fire and decompression theories offered mechanical explanations. Some investigators suggested an electrical fire in the cockpit could have incapacitated the crew while leaving the autopilot engaged. The aircraft would have continued flying until it ran out of fuel. This theory explained the lack of communication. It did not explain the deliberate turn back over Malaysia or the altitude changes tracked by military radar. A fire severe enough to disable communications should have brought the plane down quickly. Hijacking theories never gained traction. No terrorist group claimed responsibility. The two passengers traveling on stolen passports were investigated and cleared. They were Iranian nationals seeking asylum in Europe, not operatives. The cargo manifest was scrutinized. Lithium-ion batteries in the hold raised concerns about fire risk. Freescale semiconductor employees on board led to speculation about corporate espionage or intellectual property theft. None of these theories fit the evidence. What made the official story collapse was simple. Every theory required ignoring key facts. Pilot suicide did not explain why Shah would have flown for hours rather than simply nosediving the aircraft. Fire did not explain the controlled turns. Hijacking did not explain the lack of demands or claims. The satellite data, the debris field, the deliberate course changes, nothing fit together into a coherent narrative. The families who lost loved ones on Flight 370 never accepted the explanations. They formed advocacy groups. They raised funds for independent investigations. They filed lawsuits that were dismissed or settled quietly. And they waited. For 10 years, they waited for someone to tell them the truth about what happened in that cockpit and why 239 people had to die. If you're still here, you've seen how the largest search in aviation history found nothing, and how every official explanation crumbled under scrutiny. Comment 2 below if you're following this investigation. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so and turn on the bell notification so you don't miss what comes next. Your support helps us uncover the stories that governments would prefer stayed buried. Now, let's talk about what the underwater drone finally captured on camera. In February 2024, a privately funded expedition set out to do what governments could not. Ocean Infinity returned to the Indian Ocean with technology that had advanced dramatically since their 2018 search. The autonomous underwater vehicles were faster, could operate at greater depths, and carried imaging systems with resolution unimaginable a decade earlier. But this time, they were searching a different area. A British aerospace engineer named Richard Godfrey had spent years analyzing satellite data, oceanographic models, and debris drift patterns. His calculations suggested the official search had focused on the wrong section of ocean. Godfrey's predicted crash site lay roughly 500 kilometers west of the previously searched area, in a region where ocean currents would have carried debris exactly to the locations where wreckage had washed ashore. Ocean Infinity agreed to investigate. The vehicle, designated AUV-7, descended to 3,800 meters. At that depth, the pressure is 380 times atmospheric pressure at sea level. The temperature hovers just above freezing. No light penetrates from the surface. The drone navigated by sonar, creating a three-dimensional map of the seabed as it moved. For 2 days, the search turned up nothing but volcanic rock and sediment. Then, the sonar detected an anomaly. a debris field spread across 2 square kilometers of ocean floor. The drone's cameras activated. High-intensity LED arrays illuminated the darkness. What they captured was unmistakable. Fragments of an aircraft lay scattered across the seabed like pieces of a shattered toy. Sections of wing, landing gear assemblies, seats still recognizable despite a decade underwater, personal luggage torn open, clothing and shoes scattered among the wreckage. In the center of it all, a large section of fuselage lay on its side. Serial numbers were still visible through the marine growth. The footage was transmitted to the surface vessel in real time. Engineers aboard watched in silence as the drone moved through the debris field. Every frame confirmed what they had found. This was Flight 370. The search that had cost $150 million and found nothing had finally ended. Then, the drone recorded something else. Something that did not match any crash scenario investigators had proposed. The fuselage section showed damage inconsistent with a high-speed impact. The edges of the broken airframe were not torn or crumpled as would be expected from a vertical dive into the ocean. Instead, the breaks appeared clean, almost surgical. Structural members had separated at joints, rather than fracturing through solid metal. The wings had detached with minimal damage to the attachment points. And most disturbing of all, the landing gear was deployed. In a catastrophic high-speed impact or a fuel starvation scenario, landing gear remains retracted. The fact that it was down suggested the pilot had been preparing for a controlled ditching. This was not an aircraft that had run out of fuel and plunged nose first into the ocean. This was not a suicide dive. This was a controlled descent with an attempt to land on water. The pilot had been conscious, functional, and trying to bring the plane down in one piece. The drone continued its survey. It captured close-up footage of the cockpit section, separated from the rest of the fuselage but largely intact. The windscreen was shattered, but the instrument panel remained. Seats were still mounted to the floor. The control column was visible, frozen in position. Whatever had happened in that cockpit, it did not involve an explosive decompression or catastrophic structural failure. Among the debris field, the drone recorded something that sent investigators back to their data models. The aircraft's black boxes, the flight data recorder, and the cockpit voice recorder were missing. On every modern airliner, these devices are designed to survive impacts, fires, and immersion. They are built to withstand forces that would destroy the aircraft around them. They transmit locator signals for 30 days after a crash, yet neither device was visible in the wreckage. Either they had been separated and carried away by currents, or they had been removed. The cargo hold section was partially intact. The drone's cameras captured rows of containers still secured to the floor. One container showed signs of damage inconsistent with impact forces. The door had been forced open from the inside, and the contents, whatever they had been, were gone. The manifest listed electronics, lithium batteries, and commercial freight. But the container that had been forced open was registered to a shipping company with ties to defense contractors. What it had actually contained was never disclosed. Over 3 days, the drones mapped the entire debris field in 3 dimensions. Every piece of wreckage was cataloged, photographed, and positioned relative to the main fuselage section. The pattern told a story. The aircraft had not disintegrated in mid-air. It had not belly flopped onto the surface. It had descended in a controlled glide, struck the water at a survivable angle, and then broken apart as it sank. The passengers would have been conscious. They would have known what was happening. And for at least some of them, death would not have been instant. The flight path that makes no sense. The drone footage forced investigators to revisit the satellite data with new eyes. If the pilot had attempted a controlled ditching, then the final hour of flight had been deliberate. Every turn, every altitude change, every course correction had been executed by someone in control of the aircraft. The question was no longer what happened to Flight 370. It was what the pilot was doing and why. The timeline reconstruction began at 1:21, the moment the transponder was switched off. Military radar showed the aircraft turning back across Malaysia at this point. The turn was sharp, executed with precision. This was not a panicked reaction. This was a planned maneuver. The aircraft climbed to 43,000 feet, high enough to incapacitate the passengers and crew through oxygen deprivation if the cabin pressure was deliberately released. Then it descended and leveled off, weaving between radar coverage zones. At 2:22, the plane crossed over Sumatra and headed into the Andaman Sea. Here, something changed. The satellite pings recorded by Inmarsat showed the aircraft turning south. This was the turn that sealed the fate of everyone aboard. A northern route would have taken the plane over land, over airports, over populated areas where it could have been intercepted or forced to land. A southern route led only to empty ocean. Whoever was flying the plane chose the void. The altitude data from the satellite ping suggested the aircraft climbed back to cruising altitude and remained there for hours. Fuel consumption models indicated the plane flew at optimal efficiency, maximizing range. The pilot was not erratic. He was methodical. He was flying the aircraft as far from land as the fuel would allow, and when the tanks finally ran dry, he did not let the plane fall from the sky. He glided it down. Boeing engineers analyzed the ditching attempt captured in the drone footage. The angle of the fuselage sections, the separation points, the landing gear deployment, all of it pointed to a pilot trying to bring the aircraft down on the surface gently as possible. A Boeing 777 can glide roughly 20 kilometers for every kilometer of altitude. At cruising altitude, that gave the pilot over 200 kilometers of glide distance after the engines quit. He would have used that distance to line up a ditching path, to prepare the aircraft, to give himself the best chance of survival. But why? If this was pilot suicide, why attempt to survive? If this was a hijacking, why fly to the middle of nowhere? If this was mechanical failure, why were all the controlled maneuvers possible? None of it made sense until investigators looked at what the pilot had been doing in the weeks before the flight. Zahari Ahmad Shah had been vocal about political issues in Malaysia. The trial of opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim had ended in a controversial conviction just hours before Flight 370 took off. Shah had attended the proceedings. He had posted on social media expressing frustration with the government. Some interpreted this as motive for a political suicide attack, but the ditching attempt contradicted that theory. A man bent on suicide does not try to land safely. A man making a political statement does not fly away from witnesses. The reconstruction suggested something darker. Shah had wanted to disappear. He had wanted to take the aircraft and everyone aboard beyond reach, and he had succeeded. For 10 years, the ocean kept his secret. The cargo question haunted every analysis. Freescale Semiconductor employees on board held patents related to military applications. The forced open cargo container suggested someone had accessed the hold during flight. If Shah intended to steal technology or deliver it to someone, the southern Indian Ocean was the perfect drop point. A ship could have been waiting. The plane ditches, the cargo is recovered, and the evidence sinks 3,000 meters to the bottom. The passengers were collateral damage. The pilot was expendable. The mission was the cargo. This theory explained the deliberate flight path. It explained the controlled ditching. It explained why the black boxes were missing. Someone had retrieved them before the wreckage sank completely. But it required believing that a respected airline captain had murdered 239 people for money or ideology. It required believing that an operation had been planned to the minute. It required believing that governments knew and had covered it up for a decade. What they found in the wreckage. The drone survey did more than locate the wreckage. It provided forensic evidence that reopened every closed question. Investigators who had spent 10 years theorizing now had physical proof to examine, and what they found was disturbing. The fuselage sections showed signs of deliberate sabotage. Wiring bundles that should have been intact were cut. Circuit breakers in the electrical bay had been manually tripped. The emergency locator transmitter, designed to activate automatically upon impact, had been disabled before the crash. Someone in that cockpit had systematically shut down every system that would have allowed the aircraft to be found. The passenger oxygen masks had not deployed. In a rapid decompression scenario, the masks drop automatically when cabin pressure falls below a certain threshold. The absence of deployment suggested that cabin pressure had been slowly reduced rather than suddenly lost. The passengers would have gradually lost consciousness over several minutes as oxygen levels dropped. They would not have known what was happening until it was too late. Personal belongings recovered from the debris field told their own story. Phones, tablets, and laptops were found among the wreckage. Data recovery specialists attempted to extract information from the devices. Most were too corroded after 10 years underwater. But 3 phones yielded partial data. Text messages drafted but never sent. Photos taken during the flight. One passenger had recorded a video in the final minutes, holding the phone steady as the aircraft descended. The footage showed passengers unconscious in their seats. The cabin was dark. No oxygen masks visible. And in the background, the sound of the engines spooling down as the fuel ran out. The cargo hold inspection revealed more questions than answers. The container that had been forced open was empty except for packing material and fragments of what appeared to be technical documentation. Chemical analysis of residue inside the container detected traces of lithium, cobalt, and rare earth elements consistent with advanced electronics manufacturing. What specifically had been inside was impossible to determine. The manifest listed the container's contents as engineering samples. Samples of what exactly was redacted in every official document. Forensic analysis of the pilot's seat and controls found something unexpected. DNA samples recovered from the control column matched Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah. But they also matched someone else. A second individual had touched the controls during flight. The DNA profile did not match First Officer Farik Abdul Hamid. It matched one of the passengers, a Chinese national seated in business class. Background checks revealed he had worked for a defense contractor with ties to aviation systems. His presence in the cockpit suggested he had either been coerced or complicit. The black box mystery deepened when investigators examined the mounting brackets. The devices had not broken free during impact. They had been unbolted. Tool marks were visible on the attachment points. Someone had physically removed the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder before the aircraft fully sank. This required time, tools, and knowledge of where the devices were located. It suggested that at least one person survived the ditching long enough to ensure the evidence disappeared. Satellite imagery analysts reviewed archival data from the night of March 8, 2014. Commercial satellites had not been focused on the southern Indian Ocean at the time, but military satellites from multiple nations had been. Under pressure from families and independent investigators, one image was eventually declassified. Taken at approximately 8:30 in the morning local time, roughly 15 minutes after the estimated crash, the image showed a faint heat signature on the ocean surface. It was consistent with burning jet fuel. Near the heat signature, another object appeared. A vessel, small, fast, and heading away from the crash site. The vessel's identity was never confirmed. Satellite resolution was insufficient for detailed identification. Maritime traffic records showed no civilian ships in that area at that time. If a ship had been present, it was either unregistered or operating with its transponder turned off. Either scenario suggested deliberate concealment, and both supported the theory that Flight 370 had not been an accident or a suicide. It had been an operation. The truth no one wanted. The drone footage produced an uncomfortable conclusion. Flight 370 was not an accident. It was taken. The pilot, possibly with assistance, deliberately flew beyond rescue range, disabled every tracking system, and attempted a controlled ditching where recovery would be nearly impossible. The cargo was the target. The passengers were acceptable losses. Malaysia resisted releasing radar data. China conducted investigations but published nothing. The United States deployed assets but claimed to have found nothing. Every nation involved had reasons to avoid the truth. For the families, knowing changes nothing. Knowing the crash was deliberate makes it worse. They trusted the pilot. They trusted the airline. They trusted that in 2014 a commercial airliner could not simply be stolen from the sky. The wreckage remains 3,800 meters down. Too deep, too expensive. The cargo that was taken has never been recovered. If it was valuable enough to murder 239 people, then somewhere that technology is being used. Somewhere, someone profited. The families will never get justice. The drone gave them location. It gave them proof. But it cannot give them what they really want. It cannot bring them home.